Welcome to First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. I'm your host, James Gardner, certified athletic therapist, certified strength and conditioning specialist, yoga instructor, human being. This platform, for the pros, by the pros, anybody in the performance space, and beyond. Welcome here to share in the stories of professionals, experiences, journeys, learning along the way. It's a platform to connect, to network, and to be a part of a community that cares, with conversations that matter, experiences that resonate, and generate ideas, thought-provoking, organic dialogue, passionate pros. Brought to you as always by First Star Therapy, Mobility Tape, Epic, and Benchmark Athletics. In association with the Canadian Athletic Therapists Association. It's First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast. Thanks for being here. Thank you for being a part of it. All right, we're going to start this one with a cheesy pun. We are rolling here in the recording studio. We have Jeff Konin here. He's going to talk about cannabis and what you're doing with cannabis and education and in the sports space, in the athletic training space. We're obviously here at World Congress, so lots of interactions for you. But first and foremost, appreciate your time and being here. Just for our audience, capture who you are, what you're doing, where you are.
Yeah, so first of all, it's great to be here in Maynooth, and it's great to meet you and be a part of this program. I come from Florida. I'm in Florida International University, and I'm a faculty member and part of the doctorate in athletic training program. And excited to have the opportunity to be here to speak and to network with some amazing people from around the globe.
Awesome. And your topics are, I don't know, let's not call it taboo. Maybe it was taboo a bunch of years ago, but I think in our space and in this space at World Congress, like education is critical everywhere we go. So what are the angles or the approaches to a topic that a lot of people maybe misunderstand or are misinformed about or think they know everything about?
You know, you can put me in that same group of people of thinking it was taboo and not understanding it either. I mean, I was a classic athletic trainer, did drug testing and was told everything about cannabis was bad. And if you get caught with it, we're going to penalize you. And you're going to sit on somebody's couch and talk to them about the reason why you're using cannabis. And so that was how we were taught and grew up. And, let's be honest, it still is taboo. It's taboo to folks that are older that grew up in those generations. And it's taboo to folks who live in certain countries where it's still completely illegal. But as it's become more available and accessible, people have learned about it. And, curious people try it. And some people try it and find that they feel better. Whether you say they feel better because they're euphoric and it's recreational, or they sleep better, or their pain is decreased, or anything along those lines. There's many, many, many indications now that we found cannabis to be beneficial. But you bring up a good point. This is entirely education. And if I go down the hallway here at this conference, I can ask every single person about cannabis, what they know. And typically what they know is not founded on education, science, or anything along the lines of what they were taught in school. It's typically not taught in school. What they know is based on what they heard from growing up from different people informally, their neighbors, their parents, whatever. But in healthcare, it's really critical, because what I've learned and what I've done is that using it, and particularly using it inappropriately, meaning too much, the wrong time, if you believe it's therapeutic, well, everything else you do in life from a therapeutic perspective, a dose. If I say, hey, James, you have a headache. You want to take some of this aspirin I have. And I say, how much will you take? And you probably say, I take 2 or I take 3. And I say, James, why don't you take 10? And your response is because no, 10's not good. It's too much. But that's not the case when people are smoking cannabis. And I said, well, yeah, you're probably right. You might get a little better sleep and you might lose your migraine. But maybe if you take a little bit, which is a proper supervised medical dose, but you don't do that. So it's the same example of this, and you're taking too much. And I can equate this to food. I love food. You love food. Mm-hmm. And if you go out and have an ice cream sundae, that's great. But you also know that next day you've got to exercise a little bit more than usual, or you're going to wear the ice cream sundae. You don't have 3 or 4 ice cream sundaes on a regular basis because it's going to show in your body physically with weight. Well, the crazy thing about this is that cannabis stays in your system. So yes, you can drink alcohol and things can happen, but 24 hours later, what's the worst thing happens? You don't feel so good, you have a headache, and it leaves your system. Cannabis stays in your system for much longer. And so what we're starting to learn is that it's not actually necessarily only the time you're using it actively where it can show impairments, but for days and even weeks down the road later. I mean, think about this. When we drug test, that's just a snapshot in time of how much is in your system. So if a person says, but hey, I tested at this level, but I haven't smoked anything for 3 weeks. So the question we have to ask then is, well, then what's the relevance of this test? And that's where my research and clinical practice has been focused primarily on understanding by position, by gender, by sport, if you have this much in your system, whether you had it in for 3 weeks or last night, what's it doing to your physical performance? It's been really fascinating.
Key takeaways from that work. Where are you finding it? Is it variable? Is it individually based? Is it are there universal sort of applications for people to take away from what you're doing, what you're seeing?
It's a great question. And that's the thing that I've learned the most is that, as I alluded to the first question, if I ask you about cannabis, what do you know? Most everybody will stereotype one answer about it. And what I've learned is, just like you can, again, say for alcohol, well, if you drink this much, this is likely going to happen. But isn't it different for everybody? If you and I were to sit here and have a drink after a drink after a drink, I don't know your drinking habits, but both of us probably won't feel impaired at the same time. And it's exactly the same thing that happens when people are using cannabis, whether it's an edible, whether they're smoking it, or whatever form that they apply it in. Everyone has a different level of tolerability towards it. Some won't do it at all, right? That's the person that just doesn't touch alcohol. And some can take a little and wow, things change their body really fast. And then others, perhaps honestly, because they've used it a long period of time, their body has acclimated to that use, and they're still going to have impairments, but it's going to take more to put in their system, and it may stay in their system longer. So we've learned these things over time. And so, when I speak to whether it's players on different sports teams or elsewhere, I say, here's all the general things that can happen. But what's really important now is to understand you and your body. How much do you use? When do you use it? In what form do you use it? And oh, by the way, what's the sport? Because if your sport's more cardiovascular related, well, if you're smoking the cannabis, it's going to have an issue with your endurance. But another myth that's really fascinating, and I'm going to pose it to a question. If I said to you, what sports or athletes in sports do you think are the biggest users or violators, if you will, of using cannabis? What would your answer be?
Yeah, I mean, I have to think about it. We could think back to some recent cases in Canada, the snowboarding scene, and we had obviously some public knowledge of that in Canada and banning that. But again, I'm in the youth space as well, so I think it's pretty universally used. And so,
and you're 100% right. And I'll tell you that it's not gender. Most people say, oh, definitely more males than females. Not true. Some might say, well, football players, basketball players. And I'm here to tell you that I've met with tennis players, gymnastics team members, equestrian riders. It's sort of, I don't want to say the drug, but it's the choice now of this era and generation. But interestingly enough, it's not really this younger generation, say the 18 to 23-year-olds, that are actually driving it. Who's really driving this are elderly folks. When I say elderly, you have to be really, really careful because it's really like people 50 and above, if you will. Okay. And so what happens? Well, now they're starting to have medical ailments and symptoms and conditions. They're being fed cocktails of, prescription drugs, and it's costing them money. They're not liking this change of lifestyle, and they're not seeing tremendous benefits. Well, then somebody randomly says, well, have you tried CBD? Have you tried THC? And they try something because they're curious. They want a better solution. And lo and behold, they find relief. And now they think this is this magic bullet. And you know what they say? Number one, I don't really care about what the science shows. I don't care if you haven't studied this yet. This makes me feel better. And that's, at the end of the day, everything is about outcomes, quite frankly. And when they're not finding unsafe situations, okay, is it true you can find some things on the street that are not the safest forms of the product? Absolutely. You can already say about almost anything, right? You can't pick up the news one day and say that, oh, don't drink coffee, don't have chocolate, don't do whatever. So yeah, there's truth to that. But the reality is these folks have more money to expend. So they use that to donate to legislatures and enter politics. So those folks can go in and get voted in to change the laws to make this more accessible for them to use. And so has that made it more accessible for the younger generation? Absolutely. But it's not those younger folks that are changing the laws, at least in Canada, in the US, and other countries abroad.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great capture. And I just, as you're speaking, I'm sort of tying and connecting dots in my head back to a talk that was given yesterday on dehydration. And it was like, okay, is dehydration, if we ask this room full of athletic trainers, athletic therapists, is dehydration, is cramping? Is cramping a direct factor of electrolyte displacement? Some of the hands go up, majority of the hands go up. Is it dehydration? Some of the hands go up. And then we're talking on the actual evidence behind it is if we overhydrate, you have hypernatremia opportunities there, and there's very little correlation to rehydrating and these electrolyte drinks that are being marketed for sales.
We'll be back after a quick break.
Hey, it's James Gardner here, host of Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast, the official podcast of the World Federation of Athletic Training and Therapy. We are excited to announce the next International Athletic Training and Therapy Day on February 12th, 2026. IATTD 26. This year's theme is Elevating Health Worldwide. We're calling on all athletic trainers, athletic therapists, and sport rehabilitators across the world to join us in celebrating our shared profession on a global scale. During IATTD 26, we'd love to hear from individuals, organizations, associations, societies, academic programs, and more about the impact of our colleagues in elevating health for their patients, clients, and communities. There are a number of ways you can participate via social media and in your communities. Share stories. Tell us a bit about a day in your life as an athletic therapist, athletic trainer, or sport rehabilitator. Give a shout out to an athletic trainer, athletic therapist, or sport rehabilitator who's positively impacted you as a professional or you as an athlete. Ask athletes and patients to share their thoughts on the value of ATs and sport rehabilitators in their lives. Create a fun video to highlight you in your setting or community. When you post to social media, be sure to use the hashtag IATTD26 and tag us.
And worse off, the solution was, well, how come all of you stretch if you're telling us it's due to electrolyte imbalance?
Right. And so the answer, that was it, right? Kevin Miller presented from Texas, and exactly that was it. So if you're saying that it's electrolyte driven or dehydration driven cramping, but your solution is stretching, anecdotally stretching is working. So that's the thing we should probably, either study or continue to do if it's effective.
And I think one of the interesting things about this is when we talk about the buzz term of evidence-based, which really probably in the last decade or two is, really driven what we do. Quite frankly, a lot of what we do is not evidence-based. And also a lot of what becomes evidence started empirically in clinical practice. Somebody tried it, it worked. Well, let's go study it and see. But in true science, evidence says that this means that it wasn't an accident, that it worked 95 or 99% of the time because it worked. Yeah. But the fact of the matter is, if we really based everything we did on that level of evidence, there wouldn't be a whole lot of treatments that we'd be able to do. And so you could really put cannabis in this category. If you've got people who are saying, nothing's helping me, nothing's making me better, and this works 70% of the time for those people, that's a big win. Now, that's a general statement. That's the part of me that advocates in favor of cannabis. The part about me that says, okay, we have problems with cannabis is because of the lack of education, as you alluded to. We ignore a dosing mechanism. We ignore the type of application. Okay, if you're telling me that cannabis reduces your anxiety before you go out onto a stadium or a pitch with 100,000 people, you might be right. But did you understand? Here's the timing of when you should put it in your body. Here's the limit you should put in your body. And here's the way you should put it in your body. Because if you take too much too soon and inhale it, and you're in an endurance event, you want to play soccer or football here, it's not beneficial for you at all. And so the knowledge and the education is critical. The biggest gap that we have is it's not being delivered in formative education. All right. So we have practitioners that skip this during their degree phases. They end up in that so-called real world. They work with athletes who are now finding, well, this helps me, but they don't know how to have a conversation with them They've never been told good, bad, or indifferent.
Right.
And their parents told them it was bad, but when they were younger and experimenting, it wasn't all that bad. And there's this giant gap. And so actually one of the presentations that I have here is to educate the educators. And the whole goal is to say, here's how you should teach it in the curriculum. It's needed. And oh, by the way, it's not a 1-day, 45-minute lecture.
Right.
This is a system where you take a whole class on the nervous system and how it works and how you evaluate it and how you intervene. This is a big thing. But a starting point is at least have one presentation there. It's interactive where the students can learn. And when I say students, I'm talking about medical school, pharmacy. It doesn't make a difference if you're in this space. And as you started in this podcast alluding to, it's typically a taboo topic. And if you're an athlete, you don't want to ask those questions because, well, my physio or my athletic therapist reports to the coach. Can't trust them to tell the coach, well, here's why they're not playing optimally, because they just told me that smoke marijuana on a regular basis. And so it's still a very uncomfortable situation. And I talk to a lot of clinicians who say, no, but I have a great relationship. My athletes trust me, and they may be true, but not yet on this topic entirely.
Right. Yeah. And truthfully, I'm really right now, but coming back to evidence-based practice or evidence-based or evidence-informed and the empirical side of things, like placebo is also science. So if we think it works, it works. That's science as well, which is kind of like the irony of that statement.
Yeah. But this is a great point. And I don't mean to interrupt you.
No, go for it.
There's placebo. But in my travels, when I talk to people and they say, this makes me feel better, I call them an N of 1. That N of 1 is everywhere. That's beyond placebo. Mm-hmm. And that's what's fascinating to me.
This is it. And then sort of tying that back to my childhood education. It was drugs are bad, don't do drugs. And this is a gateway drug, right? Like cannabis is a gateway drug to these other things. There's a lot of misconceptions, a lot of misnomers out there, and maybe we'll revert back. Maybe we should have started here. There's a difference between marijuana, CBD, THC. So where do we start, and how do people differentiate?
How much time do you have?
Yeah, exactly. We can run into the education sector later on, but at the general capture, like my basic knowledge in being in Canada where this is legal and available through medical clinics and things like this may be different than somebody else globally. Yeah. So I understand a little bit about, the cannabinoid system in the body, and other people may not have heard of that. And then cannabinoid, the root word is cannabis. And so there's obviously some natural things that play there, but.
Yeah. So let me start by answering the gateway question. And this is the world according to Jeff Konin's opinion on this, because there's like almost every other topic, there's both sides of the argument. By definition, a gateway drug means that there's a chemical addiction to it, to which point your body no longer feels what you want it to feel by this drug. So therefore, I need a stronger drug. So gateway would mean I'm going from marijuana to heroin to cocaine to whatever. Does that happen? Yes. But is that what we typically see? No. So I don't call it a gateway drug in that sense. Now, is it addictive? It's more addictive now than it's ever been for a couple of reasons. Number one is the strains that are grown are much stronger, 5, 6, 7 times stronger than a couple of decades ago. And it's part of the name of the game. Who can grow the stronger strain? How can we match this seed with this seed and create a hybrid so it's stronger? And then, you're paying for this and you're getting the quote unquote better strain of marijuana. So from that standpoint, that keeps people coming back for more. No more addictive in that sense. And again, this is where it becomes controversial on how I present it. But if I like ice cream and I'm having a bowl of ice cream every night, that's addictive to me. Could I stop if I had to? Yes. Can you stop? In this case, you could, but because the strains are so strong, you will have some withdrawal symptoms. And so when I work with athletes who are taking too much, the advice that we have is about educating them towards tapering off. Let me give you a great example. If they had used some form of THC, which we'll describe in a second, in a vape pen to help them fall asleep, they say this helps me go to sleep, they could probably take 2 hits out of that pen, and that would be equivalent to a medicinal dose to help them relax and fall asleep. They could take 10 hits out of that pen, and they'll fall asleep. The difference is the 2 is the proper dose. The 10 is, quote unquote, an overdose. It won't kill them, but it's going to build in their system and not going to excrete through natural processes. So now you do that each night and you're building up the amount in your system. and you're not getting a better night's sleep. You're falling asleep in both cases. But now, if you actually measured your sleep each night, you wouldn't be sleeping better. You wouldn't get good deep sleep, REM. You wake up sluggish. And now you're having nanograms build up 10, 20, 50, 100, 500. And that's when we drug test and say, oh my God, look at all this. And you're saying, but I only took this much each night to fall asleep. So when we taper off, I can say, listen, if you don't have to do the 10 hits, if we can gradually get you back to 2, you're going to fall asleep just as good, and you're actually going to get better quality sleep. Now, the cannabis plant itself that you alluded to is a natural plant, and it has inside of it what we call cannabinoids. There are about 140 or so of these components, these cannabinoids, and the majority of individuals know of the ones that are in the predominance of the plant, the CBD, the THC, and the THC has multiple versions, Delta 9, Delta 8, Delta 10. But the reality is that the majority of the cannabinoids are not euphoric. They're not the stuff that makes you feel high. They don't have these lingering side effects related to this, but the THC does. And also one of the cannabinoids is sort of almost like in the middle there in this gray area called CBN, not nearly as powerful as the THC, but it gives you a little bit of relief, helps you fall asleep, things of that nature. But if you think of cannabis and the cannabinoids very simply as vitamins, you have multivitamin, which you can buy. You have vitamin A, vitamin D, vitamin whatever. And so you choose to buy a vitamin based on your need. So some people will use cannabis as a whole plant preventatively, just like they take a multivitamin each day. Mm-hmm. Yet, if I'm talking to you very specifically and you say, here's the issue I have, it's anxiety, it's sleep, it's one of many conditions. And so you don't necessarily have to take this whole thing. You actually just need this one cannabinoid that's been shown to have some therapeutic benefit for that. Now, due to the lack of clinical trials that are out there, a lot of it's trial and error, unfortunately. So I say, hey, let me look at you. This is your body size. This is how much we might dose it. And the bad quote in the profession is, well, start low and go slow, and we might increase. Okay, you didn't see a response from this dose, so maybe we'll change the dose and see if that changes.
Like any medication.
Really how every medication starts, but it starts more formally because it's acceptable and you have scientific trials. And so we haven't been approved in many cases to do these scientific trials. And to be honest with you, in my space, we absolutely haven't been able to do this in the elite athlete population. So I'll be honest with you, if you were to allow me to take, I'll say a football team, and for 2 weeks, I took this half of the team and I could give them a dosage that I wanted to control of THC, and this half, they were the control group and got nothing. And then I measured a lot of different things. I can tell you in 2 weeks, all the things that happen when you use it. That's never going to happen. That study will never be approved. And so a lot of what we do is retrospectively, we build trust, we drug test, we find out how much is in your system. You tell me your pattern of use. And then I monitor all those same data points and I can say, hey, look, you know what? You're not putting on lean muscle mass here. And I think it may be related to the amount that's in your system. So if we can decrease what's in your system over time, we might be able to change that. Can I tell you exactly why that's happening physiologically? No, I can't yet. But I can't answer a lot of different questions, how they work, but this is the outcome and here's what we find. Mm-hmm. So that's the approach we've taken right now. And the nice thing about it is when I'm working with athletes, they don't think that I come in here and I'm just lecturing, because they say, wait a second, how did you know? That's what happens to me. That's exactly what happens to me. And so here's what I think it's happening. It's really related to the amount and the timing of what you're using. So I'm educating you about dosage and application, because anytime you see a doctor and a doctor says, okay, I'm going to give you this medication, we go to the pharmacy, it's measured, they know the dosage, there's a sign outside on the bottle that says take it 1 time a day in the morning or at night. So you have a prescription. But most of the people that are using this nowadays don't really have that prescription. They don't have that knowledge, don't have the education. I don't really have anybody to tell them that. Right. And so this is the space that I found. It's been fantastic, but I'm an animal one myself, not in the sense of using it, but in the sense of educating people. And it can't be everywhere all the time. Right. So I'm in a process now. I just founded an international organization called the International Cannabis and Sport Academy. Excuse me. And online, we will populate this with lots of educational courses that people can take, whether you're a high school athlete and you need to understand, it's a very different story when you're underage and you're a minor and your brain's not developed yet, or if you're a parent of a high school athlete or a coach, how do you manage this? How do you educate this? Because as you know, if you yell at a teenager, as you said earlier, you can't do this. Well, that's a recipe for going behind your back and trying it.
Right.
And so we talk a lot about, it's all about education and understanding that the message of say no to drugs was not effective. So without acknowledging 100% that you're all going to use it, how do we better educate you to maybe actually deter you from using it?
Yeah, and we know what's happening, right? We know it's being used, and so to ignore it is ignorance on our part.
100%.
Practitioners, parents, wherever you're at. So education, again, coming back around to what World Congress is about, what WFAT's about, educating about the profession, within the profession, expertise in a variety of different areas. I think this is a really great capture. There's also a lot of like psychosocial components to usage of any substance, behavioral addiction versus chemical addiction, which we could go down 19 rabbit holes. We won't today.
And the beautiful thing though is yes, there are some countries that, don't you dare bring a vape pen through customs because it's a federal crime and it's a very serious offense. And there's other places where just don't bring it through customs, but once you're here, everything is usable. But the reality of that is it's also interdisciplinary. So like a conference like this worldwide, where it's not yet, it probably will ultimately be. And so, for example, when you have Olympic activities and there is drug testing, well, CBD is not banned on the substance list. THC is at a certain level. But there are athletes who use CBD for recovery,
right,
for decrease of acute inflammation. And that's the way they train every day. But now they come to the biggest event in their life, and it's in a country that doesn't allow this. They have to just modify the way they've trained and recovered on a regular basis. And so it's a fascinating thing where we know in certain ways some things work, but we're not allowed to do that over there. Arguably, it's no different than when you have a license to practice. You can do certain things in one place and not the other. But we're in a very, very early stage of this, of appreciating this. And so when I come to a conference like this, and we have people from all around the world, some of them were literally starting it. What is cannabis? And then others are saying, well, I see it rampant among my campus and my university. I need to learn more about this and how to educate the athletes, because actually our students that are here are really important to talk to, as I said, because they're not being taught in school, but they're the ones who are also close to the athletes, right? They're students doing immersion and clinical experiences, and they go to school with these same kids. They're the same age. So they know what's happening behind the scenes, behind closed doors. So they have the best chance of actually educating and helping us.
Right. And I think this is a great starting point for those that are out there, right? It's a different approach. It's an informed approach, just like everything that we do. It may be evidence-based, it may be empirically based, it may be anecdotally based, but the reality is if I'm going to do anything, an ankle program, a strength and conditioning program, the dosage matters, the reason behind matters. And I think where I want to take this maybe just before we wrap up is cannabis has a lot of connotations or misnomers about it. Street drug, like that's a different beast. The street drug things are laced differently now to way more, to be more potent, like you mentioned, may not just be strictly cannabis or marijuana that you're using if you're buying it from a resource that you don't know where it's coming from. And I think that's the piece that I want to kind of tease out with you being an expert in this is like it comes around to education and understanding where it's coming from.
It's a real dangerous piece. And one of the things I want to make clear in alluding to that is that I'm not here as a cannabis advocate. I'm not against it. I'm neutral. Here's what's good. Here's what's not so good. Here are the dangers and so on and so forth. And it's kind of like anything else. If I said, is the aspirin good for your headache? And you say, of course it is. I said, oh, so you can take 10? Well, no, that's not good. And so it's a very similar way, like you said, dosing wise. And so the reality is that whether it's regulated or not, there will always be an underground market on the street that sells it for less, that tries to, not pay taxes, so on and so forth. And knowing what you have and where you get it from is critically important. We don't have that issue with regular pharmaceuticals because we know the process. And I talk to athletes all the time and say, well, are you comfortable? Do you know where you're getting it? Is it safe? And they say, oh, yeah, I know this person very well. And my next question is, well, do you know where they get it from? And you only have to go 2 layers deep to find out that they have absolutely no idea the hands it's crossed, the path it's came through, whether it was Mexico, China, whatever, really what's in what they're getting. They don't understand. And that's really scary, especially nowadays more than the past when you think about that. And so, so education is critical. By the same token, if you purchase yours from a dispensary in a state that legally sells it for recreational purposes, some could say, well, look at those people. They're not like professionals. It's a part-time job that they're selling you this. So how do you trust it? But think about this. If one person, I'll use the US or Canada as an example, one person died from cannabis they bought at one of those mom and pop dispensary shops, don't you think the government would come in immediately and shut them all down? Isn't it interesting? So when you talk about the adverse effects, it's not because of cannabis being bad. It's when you're abusing the cannabis, like if you abuse anything else, is when you start to have more of the negative conditions. Unfortunately, what we don't know yet really well are what are all the side effects when you use this? How does it mix and match with certain medications or conditions? Because they haven't been studied. But you've seen commercials, right? And a commercial comes on for a medication. And if you actually pay attention beyond the jingle, don't they tell you, well, let your doctor know if you have one of the next, and they roll off like 35 different things?
Yep, that's
right.
Like a primary education tool. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it's really, really different than everything else. It just has had a negative connotation from its origin per se, from a political standpoint. And in some countries, it remains that way.
Yeah. I sort of tie this in, and I won't want to take up much more of your time. You do have another presentation today. You've been wonderful with the time you've given and the presentations that you've given here. The supplement industry, right? Protein powders, amino acids, pre-workouts. I talk to athletes all the time. It's like, is it approved? Has it been tested before you take it, right? And so your risk reward versus being informed, same angle, right?
Yeah, of course. First of all, the athlete at the end of the day is always responsible for what he or she puts in their body. And we tell them that all the time. One of the groups I speak with the most are sports nutritionists, dietitians that work with teams, which is becoming a really popular, up and coming profession and role. And I explain to them, in this cannabis space now, when it was taboo and drug tested, nobody asked you any questions because they didn't want you to know they were using it. But now that it's not taboo or drug tested in most cases for illegally, they want to learn more. And who better to come to than those of you who have expertise and understanding labels and products, and when they bring you these supplements and you're the person that they lean on and trust. So you need to understand this, because one of the biggest problems is the athletes don't know who to talk to about this to get educated. And unfortunately, when they talk to the people they trust all the time on everything else, right, they come to you because you train them and you're supposed to know everything. But you don't. But you also feel like, well, if I tell you I don't know the answer to this, that's not good. I'm supposed to know the answer to this, right? So what are the options? That athlete comes to you with this, we'll call it a supplement, but it's a hemp-based product, CBD oil. And they say, hey, is this any good? We have three options. You can say, I don't know anything about it. That's not good, because now they've lost, you're not the guy I'm coming to anymore with this topic, which, by the way, when they come to you with something and say, ask you a question about it, they're usually already tried it. Yeah. They're just kind of looking for your reaffirmation, right? Yep. Right. Yep. The second thing you can say is the old-fashioned answer, oh, no, that's bad. Don't touch it at all. And that's probably completely erroneous. And again, now if they've already used it and then nothing bad's happened, they're thinking you still don't know what you're talking about. So the real answer to this is, okay, I am educated already. Let me see what this is. What's inside of here? Let me give you some information. Or I don't know about this, but I know who I can call and get the answer, and I'll get back to you. The latter is always the best answer. If you know something, you can give an answer. If you know a little bit, you can know where to go find the answer. And so, like the information I share, I don't expect everybody to remember everything I'm telling them, but I do expect them to know, here's some of the key things, most common things that happen. Here's the best way to communicate with them to build your trust and keep your trust with them. And then here's the things like not to say. And then, yeah, I'm available. Reach out to me, call me, talk. I'm happy to talk to anybody there, because my mission is to educate. And I say this, I'm 8 years into really specializing in this area. And when people first saw what I was doing, I thought I was nuts. My friends wouldn't talk to me. I was, what is wrong with this guy? All of a sudden, he's so excited about marijuana, because I was onto something. And what I realized was that I focus on what I'm doing with my athletes to get them better. And if there's a third party out there doing something else, right? So I'm working with an athlete every day, but I don't know that they're seeing somebody else. You could call it a chiropractor, whoever you want. 3 days a week, they're going to see that person. I don't know what that person's doing. So I don't know if they're not getting better because there's another intervention clashing with one. I don't know if they're actually getting better because of that person, what they're doing. And this is the same thing. So I said, wouldn't you want to know the answer to this? If the cannabis has the ability to either help or harm what you're doing with them, wouldn't you want that knowledge? And so I think the whole team needs to have knowledge, including the coach, because if the coach catches wind of their use, then they should communicate with someone else who can then get to that person, have a conversation.
Yeah, it's a brilliant caption. We'll get back in touch here. I'd love to circle back around and do whatever I can do to support what you're doing. I think it's important. It's always important to not turn a blind eye to things and create a resource my experience just based off of that is I can say I don't know in front of an athlete, but I'm going to look into it. And maybe even better, let's look into it together. Then we're building trust, then we're building connectivity to what's going on and being real, as opposed to sweeping under the carpet, or that's a gateway drug, or that's a slippery slope, don't do it.
And what you've just described is how you empower the athlete. I tell people, I don't advise them, educate them. Let them make the decision. You give them the information, and they're adults in most cases, maybe they're not, but educate whoever it is that's the stakeholder and let them make the best decision on it, like they would do throughout life. And that builds trust.
Awesome. Jeff Konin here at World Congress with us. To our listeners out there, we'll put up some resources for what you're doing, where you're doing it, those kinds of things. You can always reach out to me, be able to reach out to Jeff in the future. Truly appreciate your time. I'll let you close this out with just sort of, maybe we'll step away from what you're presenting on. One theme, one thing you've taken away from being here in an international event for our profession, within our profession.
Everybody comes here for the same reasons: the passion, the ability to network with others who have that same level of passion. And when you're here and you have finite times to share your expert message with everyone else, it's an efficient way to leave here with nuggets on many different areas. You might walk into a presentation that's initially not of interest to you, but you become engaged because of the expert level of what's being shared. And it's a conference like this that makes a difference for how people practice every day.
We're making a difference. You're making a difference. Really appreciate your time. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thanks again for being here. Thanks for listening. Thanks for being a part of this community. Check us out online, firststartherapy.com. That's FIRSTAR therapy.com. Or email us with feedback, consult@firststartherapy.com, CONSULT@firststartherapy.com, on Instagram @firststar.therapy, and our podcast host @letschat.at. This is First Star Let's Chat, an athletic therapy podcast.